welcome back to my channel, Heti Books. I'm Camila. Today I am back with another prize. September is like back to prize time. So right now I'm going to be, it's not really a reaction, but I'm going to be commenting on the Scotiabank Giller Prize long list for 2022. This is a prize based in Canada, so it's Canadian literature. I'm Canadian. Hello. Nice to meet you. So when I learned about this prize, I thought it'd be a great point, and time for me to find out about authors that I've potentially never heard about, and also to highlight them on my channel. I know the majority of people who follow me are American or British, but I'm hoping, that you extend your reading. I think a lot of the prizes are kind of, there's always authors from around the world, but I feel like Canadian authors maybe a bit less. Although I said that, like, he obviously just won the Women's Prize for this year, But yes, so I'm going to be looking at the 14 books that have just been longlisted. So a little background, I guess, on the Scotiabank Giller Prize. So the Giller Prize was founded by Jack Rabinovich in 1994. I'm learning as we are together here. It highlights the very best in Canadian fiction year after year. I mixed fiction and year there. In 2005, the prize was teamed with Scotiabank, and that increased the winnings, which is great for authors. So they award $100,000 annually to the author of the best Canadian novel. That is an amazing prize. And that's only for books written in or published in English. So obviously that's always a bit disappointing, but whatever. What I will be following later in the year will be the Governor General's book awards, GG Books or whatever they go by, like the short, and that has like best in French and best in English, which I think is great. Yeah, the award is named in honor of the late literary journalist Doris Giller by her husband, Toronto businessman Jack Rabinovich. So let's look at these books. The jury read 138 books this year, which is, a large amount. Of those books, they picked 14 to longlist. And the longlist just came out, I think yesterday, where I was obviously filming my reaction to the Booker long shortlist. So yeah, anyway, so here I am today. Out of the 14 books, and that's why it's not like a reaction, it's more a commentary on the books and highlighting them, is because I'd never heard of any of these books. I'd never heard of any of these authors. So it's a great start for Camila that I'm, discovering new voices like I had planned, basically. So it's great. Let's start with the first book, obviously. That's how you start. So it is A Minor Course by Billy Ray Belcourt, an urgent first novel about breaching the prisons we live inside. And it says it's from one of Canada's most daring literary talents. So it says it's his first novel, so I'm guessing he's been writing short stories or poetry, but I'm just gonna go with what I'm assuming here. So it says an unnamed narrator abandons his unfinished thesis and returns to northern Alberta in search of what eludes him, the shape of the novel he yearns to write, an autobiography of his rural hometown, the answers to existential questions about family, love, and happiness. What ensues is a series of conversation, connections, and disconnection that reveals the texture of life in a town literature has left unexplored, where the friction between possibility and constraint provides an insistent background score. Well, that sounds really interesting, but I don't have much more to say about that. Next is In the City of Pigs by André Forget. So it says, a failed musician obsessed with avant-garde art enters a shadowy world where bohemian excess meets the avaricious interests of a real estate cabal. Guys, I don't understand what a real estate cabal is. Anyway, Alexander Odkazov is finished with Montreal. Having wasted his youth out on the love of art, he's ready for the life of anonymous condo towers and profitable boredom. But when he moves to Toronto, he is forced into a monkish existence by the unforgiving pressures of the city, until he stumbles across a story about an ambitious experimental music collective that could be his ticket to a better job and a better life. He's desperate to prove himself as a journalist. So he chases answers that take him from Forest Hill Mansion to the bottom of Halifax Harbour. Finance, capitalism, avant-garde, art, big money. The beginning was interesting, but then it seems to fall into, well, the avaricious interest of a real estate cabal or whatever. That's less interesting to me, but, you know, could be really good. Next, we have Lesser Known Monsters of the 21st Century by Kim Fu. In the 12 unforgettable tales of lesser known monsters of the 21st century, the strange is made familiar and the familiar strange, such that a girl growing wings on her legs feels like an ordinary rite of passage, while a bug-infested house becomes an impossible Kafkaesque nightmare. Each story builds a new world all its own. A group of children steal a haunted doll, a runaway bride encounters a sea monster, etc., etc. These visions of modern life wrestle with themes of death and technological consequences, guilt, and sexuality, as they unmask the contradiction that exists within all of us. Well, that's definitely grabbing me. It sounds like a short story collection, and yeah, it sounds really good. Obviously, these are kind of themes that I'm very keen to read about: death, technological, yeah, that's the word. Consequences. I think that's really interesting, and more I think we're reading about that. Guilt and sexuality again. Yeah, so I'd be keen to read that one, and I really like the cover as well. Next, we have Stray Dogs and Other Stories by Rawi, Hage. It says, in Montreal, photographer's unexpected encounter with actress Sophia Loren leads to a life-altering revelation about his dead mother. In Beirut, a disillusioned geologist eagerly awaits the destruction that will come with an impending tsunami. In Tokyo, a Jordanian academic delivers a lecture at the conference receives haunting news from the Persian Gulf. And in Berlin, a Lebanese writer forms a fragile, fateful bond with his volube German neighbors. Well, that sounds really interesting. I wonder how they're all connected. So it says the irresistible characters in Stray Dogs lead radically different lives, but are all restless travelers moving between states, nation states, and states of minds, seeking connection, escaping the past, and following delicate threads of truth. Well, that sounds really good as well. I want to read this. That sounds really good. And I said, oh, what connects them? It's other stories. So clearly it's a collection of short stories as well. Next is Pure Color by Sheila Heti. Here we are just living in the first draft of creation, which was made by some great artist who is now getting ready to tear it apart. In his first draft, a woman named Mayr leaves home for school. There she meets Annie, whose tremendous power opens Mayr's chest like a portal to what she doesn't know. When Mayr is older, her beloved father dies, and she enters the strange and dizzying dimension that true loss opens up. Pure Color tells the story of a life from beginning to end. It is a galaxy of a novel, explosive, celestially bright, huge, and streaked with beauty. Sheila Heti is a philosopher of modern experience and has reimagined what a book can hold. Well, that's intriguing. I still have no clue what really this is about, or like the form and shape of this book, but it seems like it's a bit experimental, which sounds really good. I feel like I saw this cover in one of Nick's Read's videos. I'll have to go back and see. But yes. Next we have All the Quiet Places by Brian Thomas Isaac. In 1956, a 6-year-old Eddie Thomas lives with his mother Grace and his little brother Louis near the Salmon River at the far edge of the Okanagan Indian Reserve in the British Columbia southern interior. Grace, her friend Isabel's husband Ray, and his new nephew Gregory crossed the border to work as summer farm laborers in Washington state. There, Eddie is free to spend long days with Gregory exploring the farm, climbing a hill to watch the sunset, listening to the wind in the grass. The boys learn from Ray's funny and dark stories, but when tragedy strikes, Eddie returns home grief-stricken, confused, and lonely. Another intriguing book that I don't know where it's going or what it's completely exploring. Like, is it exploring like when he's back, or is it exploring when he's in Washington? But, you know, very intriguing. Sounds good. Next, we have Avenues of Champions by Conor Kerr. Daniel is a young Métis man searching for a way to exist in a world of lateral violence, intergenerational trauma, and systemic racism. Facing obstacles of his own at every turn, he observes and learns from the lived realities of his family members, friends, teachers, and lovers. He finds hope in the inherent connection of indigenous people to the land and the permanence of culture, language, and ceremony in the face of displacement. Okay, I already feel like I'm into this book. Don't like the cover. It's a specific style, isn't it? So it seems to be set in Edmonton. The story considers Indigenous youth in relation to the urban construct and colonial spaces in which they survive. From violence, whitewashing, trauma, and racism, to language revitalization, relationship with elders, restaking land claims, and ultimately triumph. It's a debut novel. Yeah, that sounds really, really good as well. I think that sounds like a perspective that I'm really keen to read, basically. Next, we have The Sleeping Car Porter by Suzette Mayr. The Sleeping Car Porter brings to life an important part of Black history in North America, from the perspective of a queer man living in the culture that renders him invisible in two ways. Affecting, imaginative, and visceral enough that you'll feel the rocking of the train, The Sleeping Car Porter is a stunning accomplishment. Baxter's name isn't George, but it's 1929 and Baxter is lucky enough as a Black man to have a job as a sleeping car porter on the train that crisscrosses the country. So when the passengers call him George, he has to just smile and nod and act invisible. What he really wants to do is go to dentistry school, but he'll have to save up a lot of nickels and dimes to get there, so he puts up with George. On this particular trip west, the passengers are more unruly than usual, especially when the train is stalled for 2 extra days. Their secrets start to leak out and blur with the sleep deprivation hallucination Baxter is having. When he finds a naughty postcard of two queer men, Baxter's memories and longings are reawakened. Keeping it puts his job in peril, but he can't part with the postcard or his thoughts of Edwin Drew, porter instructor. That sounds really good. I really like that it seems to be mostly based like on a train journey, like a short train journey or something. So I feel like he'll have this kind of effect of short time, but with like memories. It sounds, yeah, I'd definitely be up for that one. Next we have If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor and Naga. In the aftermath of the Arab Spring, an Egyptian American woman and a man from the village of Shobrakate meet at a cafe in Cairo. He was a photographer of the revolution and now finds himself unemployed and addicted to cocaine, living in a rooftop shack. She is a nostalgic daughter of immigrants returning to a country she's never been to before, teaching English and living in a light-filled flat with balconies on all sides. They fall in love and he moves in, but soon their desire for one another, for the selves they want to become, takes a violent turn that neither of them expected. The beginning really attracted me. Sounds really cool to see the perspective of like the person who's living there, the person who's arriving back into a culture, and a country that they've never been in. The end there with the violence kind of puts me off a little bit, but could see what other reviews have said about it before diving in. Then we have Lucien and Olivia by André and Narbonne. This is a comic statement on the beautiful waywardness of life. Built on scenes of discovery and error, the novel satirizes the transactional views of human relationships that has elbowed its way into our lives by way of contemporary political discourse. I feel like that's all that was on that page, and so I have no idea. I have no idea what this is about. So I'm intrigued, but I don't know more about it. Next we have Hotline by Dimitri Nasrallah. This is, the first tagline is a vivid love letter to the 1980s and one woman's struggle to overcome the challenges of immigration. I feel like I'm already into that. It's 1986 and Muna Haddad is in a bind. She and her son have moved to Montreal, leaving behind a civil war filled with bad memories in Lebanon. She has planned to find work as a French teacher, but no one in Quebec trusts her to teach the language. She needs to start making money and fast. The only work Muna can find is as a weight loss center as a hotline operator. Nasrallah has written a vivid elegy of the 1980s, the years he first moved to Canada, bringing the era's systemic challenges into the current moment through his deeply endearing portrait of struggle, perseverance, and bonding. I'm very interested by that. 1986 is actually the year that my father moved to Canada as an immigrant. I feel like a connection to that, and also I like that it's a perspective of a woman. And yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. And eye-opening perspective. So yeah, very good. And what we're in the final stretch, the final 3 books, which next we have What We Both Know by Fawn Parker. Hilary Green's father, once a celebrated author and public figure, is now losing his memory, and with it his ability to write. Her father compulsively watches himself in old interviews, memorizing his own speech, trying to hang on to who he was. An aspiring author herself, Hilary impulsively agrees to ghostwrite his final work, a memoir spanning his career, and releases it in his name. Diving deep into her father's past and in turn her own, a horrifying truth begins to piece itself together. Oh, that sounds intriguing again. Whoever writing these blurbs is doing a great job, because I'm always like, ooh, I want to know more. And I definitely want to know more here. The first part didn't attract me as much. Obviously, the what seems like potentially Alzheimer's, I guess, when he's losing his memory and all of that is not as interesting to me personally. But I like the idea of her being a ghostwriter, and obviously it's a memoir, so diving into some of the secrets of his past and whatever might have happened. Okay. Then we have We Measure the Earth with Our Bodies by Tsering, Yangzom, Lama. I really like this cover, actually. It says, in the wake of China's invasion of Tibet throughout the 1950s, Lama and her sister Tenki arrive at a refugee camp on the border of Nepal, having survived a dangerous journey across the Himalayas into exile when so many others did not. As Lama, haunted by the loss of her homeland and her mother, the village oracle, tries to rebuild a life amid a shattered community, hope arrives in the form of a young man named Samfel and his uncle, who brings with him an ancient statue of the nameless saint, a relic long rumored to vanish and reappear in times of need. Decades later, the sisters are separated, and Tenki is living with Lama's daughter Dolma in Toronto's Parkdale neighborhood. While Tenki works as a cleaner and struggles with traumatic memories, Dolma vies for a place as a scholar of Tibetan studies. But when Dolma comes across a nameless saint in a collector's vault, she must decide what she is willing to do for her community, even if it means risking her dreams. Oh, that sounds amazing. I don't know if I've read anything by an author from Tibet before. I believe the author is from Tibet. So it sounds really good. And yeah, I feel like at the moment, this is my favorite summary. And I would definitely go for it. And finally, we have Mouth to Mouth by Antoine Wilson. It says, in a first-class lounge at JFK Airport, our narrator listens to Jeff Cook, a former classmate he only vaguely remembers, as he shares the uncanny story of his adult life. A life that changed course years before the moment he resuscitated a drowning man. Jeff reveals that after that traumatic, galvanizing morning on the beach, he was compelled to learn more about the man whose life he had saved, convinced that their fates were now entwined. But are we agents of our fate, or are we its pawns? Upon discovering that the man is renowned art dealer Francis Arsenault, Jeff begins to surreptitiously visit his Beverly Hills gallery. Although Francis does not seem to recognize him as the man who saved his life, he nevertheless casts a legendary eye on Jeff and sees something worthy. He takes the young man under his wing, initiates him into his world where knowledge, taste, and access are currency. A world where value is constantly shifting and calling into question what is real and what matters. The path of the two men come together and diverge in dizzying ways until the novel's staggering ending. That's so interesting, like the whole mouth to mouth, and like it starts with someone listening to the story. So it feels like potentially like an unreliable narrator who doesn't really know everything. Sounds interesting. I'm not sure it would be a book that I would go for. But anyway, there we have it. Those were the 14 books longlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize this year. Out of all 14, I think there are a couple that I feel quite kind of attracted to reading. So the first is Lesser Known Monsters of the 21st Century. Then definitely The Sleeping Car Porter, Hotline, We Measure the Earth with Our Bodies, and probably Avenue of Champions, maybe Stray Dogs. I feel like those would be like the half that I would definitely be interested in reading. The other ones, less so at the moment. But very interesting to find out new titles, new authors to me. And I look forward to the shortlist being announced at the end of the month. So I'll get back to you when that's out. And I guess we'll see which of these books have made it. I'm not planning on reading any of them right now, but I may start looking potentially if they're accessible here. Obviously, this is Canadian books. They're not always accessible straight away in the UK and stuff like that. But yeah, some very interesting books, some really interesting topics, a lot of diversity. It's not quite equal, you know, male, female, but anyway, I still feel like there's a lot of diversity that I don't feel like I've seen a lot on other lists. So Canada showing, like, you know, a lot of the different perspective that I feel like I know it from, and I feel like that's great. Let me know if there's any of these books that interest you, if you've heard of them, what you thought, you know, really interested in your perspective. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and hey, see you back. Bye.